Hello, everybody. Thank you and welcome everyone for joining us for this presentation and discussion on e-commerce and the sales tax landscape, what manufacturers and distributors should know. My name's Catherine and I am the partner manager at DCKAP. This morning, we will be hearing from Jordan Carpenter, Strategic Alliance Manager at Avalara. With 9 years within the technology sector and the past 2 managing alliances for Avalara, he has a passion for e-commerce and sales tax and has a strong understanding of the tax landscape and benefits of automation. As well as Praveen Venugopal, e-commerce technologist at DCKAP. He's been working at DCKAP as a solution consultant for over 4 years and over 7 years at Amazon prior to that. He provides solutions in the B2B and B2C space with a specialization in driving online revenue for manufacturers and distributors. They'll be discussing the rapidly changing shifts in business due to the current climate and some important things to know. Praveen will start by discussing the shifting landscape and leveraging e-commerce to the fullest. Then Jordan will take us through more on sales tax nexus and automating tax compliance. We will make sure to answer all your questions at the end of the session, but feel free to send them in the Q&A tab throughout the presentation. And the chat is also available as well for any comments or responses. And this session will also be recorded and we will be sending that out by email afterwards. So to begin, I'd like to welcome Praveen to start the presentation.
Thank you, Kathy, for the introductions.
Right.
This is Praveen here, and I'm very excited to be part of the session today. And with respect to today's session, I would like to start off with a quote from Seth Godin, who is one of the influential figures, as you might be knowing. The quote says that the reason it seems that the prices all your customers care about is that you haven't given them anything else to care about. So this comes in as a very strong statement for me. And with respect to what we are trying to accomplish as part of today's session is trying to understand on what are the what is the current B2B landscape, and specifically in terms of how you can leverage e-commerce to the fullest to see the full potential of leveraging your business and growing your business. And moving on from here, even before we get started, I want to give you all a quick background about DCKAP. DCKAP is a full-service digital commerce agency. We have been in business for over 15 years, and we have over 150 employees right now. We started off with a couple of desks, and we specifically concentrate on the e-commerce side of things. And right now we have over 10,000 community members, and I warmly welcome you all to the DCKAP community. And we have a strong relationship with Avalara, and listed below are some of our Avalara customers. Moving on from that, I just wanted to talk about our product suite. So we have 4 products in our product suite. The first one being Chloris, which is more of a workflow automation platform, which helps integrating multiple systems. It could be an ERP, or it could be an e-commerce system. It could be a PIM, or it could be a CRM. So as long as they have APIs associated with them, so we should be able to automate them. So that's where Chloris plays a critical role. And then FlexiPIM is more in terms of a flexible product information management system, which helps you to manage all of your product content and then centralize your product content and then circulate it across multiple channels. So that's where FlexiPIM plays a role. And then we have Productimize, which is more of a product customization platform. It could be like the jewelry that you might be seeing, where you could do the engravings and all of that. And that is where Productimize would fit in. And then we have QATouch, which is a workflow management platform, and it also helps with test automation. So moving on from that, so now let's discuss about the shifting landscape on the B2B vertical specifically. And to start off, I just wanted to put in some numbers. The computer monitor sales have gone up by 172%, and Zoom daily participants increased to 300 million. And these are not really surprising facts, right? So this is something which you would take for granted considering the current landscape. But then you might be thinking on how the Zoom participants is really critical for businesses, or more on the distribution side of things. Yeah, so as you might assume, Zoom helps you with the conversations that you have right now on a day-to-day basis. But more importantly, we see a lot of businesses leveraging Zoom for as part of their websites as well, wherein your customers can directly reach out to your sales rep So that way, the cycle in which they reach out to the sales rep comes down drastically. So that is where this pretty much comes in. And with respect to the King Arthur Flow online sales, that has gone up by 1000% just with the pandemic in place. But then even prior to that, over the last 1 year or so, they have been doing 2000 to 3000% increase in sales. And this is also a supporting fact if you really think about it. So, and this is also something which you would take for granted in some ways, considering the current interaction. So we are in some ways forced to adopt to the digital enabled sales interaction. And you see that going up twofold just with the pandemic coming in. And the next one is an even more interesting stat I would like to talk about. So here, as you could see, so 54% of the customers generally had this feeling that the new sales channels would increase their business and help, or increase their sales and help with their business. But then with the pandemic coming in, so again, you're kind of forced to take it in. But then once you've tried to accommodate that part of it, we see that over 65% of the customers are feeling that the new sales model is really effective. And this basically talks about the resistance that you might have because you have been using your systems and you have been interacting with your customers in a given model. And again, it takes time to make that shift. It might look like a paradigm shift, but then these are baby steps which we could take towards your digital transformation journey. And here, as you could look at this, even without the pandemic into picture. So if you look at the stats over here, so we are looking at the 2016 and 2019 statistics. Even during this period, as you could see, the self-service models is what the customers are really looking for. So as you could see over here for the evaluation part of it, so it has gone up by threefold. So from 18%, it has gone to 60%. For research, it has gone twice. And for ordering, it is increasing. And right now, it has increased even more drastically from whatever we have seen so far. And these are some of the stats which resonates in terms of having the digital transformation and having a self-service model for your customers. So right now, we'll talk about how you can leverage e-commerce to the fullest. And here, even before I get on over there, I would like to talk about the low effort experiences. So that's the key for your end consumers. So with respect to low effort experiences, what do I mean? So low effort experiences could be anything. So how are the customers interacting with you? If you're able to automate a lot, some part of it, or if you're able to kind of reduce the number of steps that they're taking on your website, or even if they're able to identify something on your website with ease. So those are all low effort experiences. And there are a couple of stats which stands out over here. So as you can see, 88% of customers increase spending just because of the low effort experience. There are multiple aspects to it, but then just because you're able to provide them the low effort experience, you are able to get or you are able to retain 88% of the customers in some ways. And again, going back to the Seth Godin's quote that we saw some time back. So again, price is not the only differentiator. Then what else could be the other differentiator? If you really think about it, low effort experiences is what can differentiate you from the competitors. And even more interesting status of these 88% of the customers, 94% of them tend to reorder from you if they get that low effort experience. So now I'll talk about some of the aspects specifically on the low effort experience. So basically what I've tried to do is I've tried to compose or collate most of the experiences that we have had with multiple customers, and I'm presenting it to you. So, and again, this might not be an all-inclusive list, but then these have been some of the proven models that we have seen working for our customers in terms of providing the low effort experience and eventually helping with driving revenue. And I would like to take a second over here for you all to kind of reflect on what are the low effort experiences that you are providing for your customers right now. And as we go along the slides, you can also post that on the chat. And in case if you feel these are some low effort experiences that we are doing already, and these are some things which we could be potentially doing. So feel free to post that in the chat. So the first one I wanted to talk about is on having a product information management system in place, commonly called as a PIM. Having a PIM is really critical. So consider a scenario where you're selling across multiple channels and you would ideally want to centralize your data. And then you would also want to control on what data goes into the respective channels. So that's a key part, and maintenance of the product data and curation of it and making bulk edits to it. So these are some of the aspects that you would really want to automate. And that way it helps you to reduce a lot of manual efforts internally within your organization. And you also tend to provide a much richer experience for your customers. And the next aspect I wanted to talk about is on the workflow automation. This is, for a lot of customers, this is an overlooked aspect, I would say, based on my interactions with our customers. So with respect to workflow automation, what am I referring here? Think about a scenario where you have your customer, and with respect to customers, so they are ordering something online and they want to pick it up from the store. This could be one scenario. And think about one other scenario, right? So where they are placing an order on the store, but then they would also like to see on what points they have accrued on the store, on the website. And this is one use case. And again, on a distribution ecosystem, it is even more critical that they tend to see a consistent experience. So that is what workflow automation will really help you with. So they get to see the consistent experience, even if they're making a call, or even if they're accessing their website, or if they are trying to reach out to the sales reps. So this is one thing. And again, this is just with the customer taken into perspective. If you think about some of the other aspects, so even from your warehouse, if you're scanning the barcodes and then that goes into the ERP and then somebody is calling you, and all of that needs to be interconnected. So that's where workflow automation plays a very critical role. So now we'll talk about a few solution offerings that we had provided for our customers based on some of their requirements and based on our research in terms of what works really best for them. And that's something which I'll be talking through in the next few slides. So the first is shop by diagram. So think about a scenario. So you have a customer or a customer base, I would say, who's purchasing cars, and then they would ideally like the spare parts for the car and all of that. It might not be really easy for them to identify the right item number or the SKU, and then trying to order it with one other distributor who might be a reseller by himself. So again, it's kind of complicated. So you could automate that part of it online as well. So as you could see over here, so you could pretty much choose on what is it that you really are searching for. You can search for the model number, and then you could kind of split it up. And as you could see over here, and specifically show on what part is residing where. So the customers really know on what they're purchasing. And then they could add it to the cart and then subsequently place the order. So this is one use case which has been very helpful for our customers. And the next one is credit line. And with respect to credit line, it is basically the payment terms that you have with your customers. With your customers, you might have monthly payment terms or once in 3 months. And based on your customer base, it could be different, and everyone could have a completely different credit line associated with them. So you could pretty much manage all of that even within an e-commerce channel. So this has been considered more of an offline method, but you could pretty much do all of that online as well. As you could see over here, your customers could apply for credit from the website, and then you could approve the credit, and you can also apply a particular credit limit based on whichever customer that you're approving the credit for. And the next one I want to talk about is the customer specific catalog and pricing. So as you might be knowing, so with respect to most of your customers, at least 20% of the customers in general constitute to maybe 80% of your revenue. And these are some of the key customers that you might be having. And with respect to these key customers, you might want to provide a special pricing for them. And then you might also want to provide a special catalog also for them, which is not available for all the customers. And with respect to having a special catalog, it could be multiple reasons. Maybe it could be flammable products as well, where you want to give it only for specific customers. So you could do all of that from the e-commerce channel. As you can see over here, so you could pretty much add products to a catalog, and then eventually you can assign the pricing structure and assign companies to it. So you could do all of that within an e-commerce channel. And the next one is on negotiated pricing. And this is also something which we consider to be more of an offline or a face-to-face interaction works best. I would agree to you to a certain extent, but then you could do all of that. So even in the current scenario, as you really think about it, so that is a really important aspect. And with respect to negotiated pricing, so your customers can request for a price, and then you could say, this is the price I want to give you. And your customers can say, maybe I'm not really happy with this price, and they want a revised price. And then you could have multiple transactions and then decide upon a price, and eventually they could place the order right from the website. So that's the intent of negotiated pricing. As you could see over here, the customers can add multiple products for a quote, and then eventually you can approve them or cancel them based on whatever discussions you had with them. And the next one is workflow-driven approval mechanism. And as I was talking about some of your elite set of customers, as you might be knowing, they would be having a company structure, which means that that could be a business owner, and that could be an approval manager, and that could be a purchasing assistant, and that could be multiple levels in between as well. And everyone could have a purchasing power or purchasing limit in terms of what they could purchase. And that is what you can control within this, within an e-commerce platform as well. As you can see over here, you can give different set of permissions for different set of accounts. And eventually, based on what permissions they have, in this case, it is more of a purchasing assistant. So they tend to add all of them to the cart, and then they can request for order approval. Then it goes to the sales manager or the approval manager, and then they get to approve the order, and then the order gets placed. So you could do all of that even on an e-commerce channel. And the next is on the sales rep ordering. So even though we are looking at providing a self-service model for our customers, there are going to be some set of customers who are very comfortable having conversations with your sales rep on a day-in, day-out basis. Or in some cases, they could be some of your legacy customers who want to stay with what they're doing in, on the offline mode, and they really do not want to do things on the website. Even if that's the case, you can enable your sales reps from the e-commerce channel. So that's also something which you can do within an e-commerce channel. As you could see, each customer can have multiple, or each sales rep could have multiple customers associated with them. And eventually the sales rep can place orders on their behalf, but at the same point of time, the customer can see on what has been done on his account. So that way it gives complete control for the sales rep, and it also gives complete transparency for the customer. And the next one I wanted to talk about is on the tax exemption. So Jordan is going to be talking in detail on taxes and all of that. That's going to be more of an automated process. But then if you want to collate the tax exemption certificates on your website and then set an expiry date, so that way you need not track on when it is getting expired and all of that, and then automate that to Avalara. So you could do all of that from even from the website. So it gives you complete control on those lines as well. And these are some of the solution offerings I just wanted to discuss about as part of our session today. And here's a quick summary, and in terms of the key takeaway, I would say. So do concentrate on the low effort experience. So that's going to be the key, and that's going to be the key differentiator in today's world. And if you're just looking at pricing to be the differentiator, so in the likes of Amazon and all of that, which is coming up. So again, pricing, just having pricing being the differentiator might not help your cause. So you should be ideally thinking of the other things that you can be doing on top of the pricing, or even with respect to some of the customers, pricing might not be a key constraint if you're able to give them the self-service model. So on a high level, that would be the key takeaway I would like you to take from the session today. And as part of it, so you can provide the consistent experience which drives loyalty for your customers, at the same point of time saves on your manual efforts, and eventually that helps drive revenue for your company. So thanks a lot for your time today. So and before I just hand it over to Jordan, just wanted to talk about the value that Avalara brings to DCKAP and its customers. The first thing being the ease of setup. So with Avalara, you just need to install that app or extension, and you're all set to go. You just need to put in your credentials on the back end, and you're good to go. And it's a platform agnostic solution, which means that even if you're moving across multiple platforms, you can carry Avalara alongside with you. So it helps you in that aspect as well. And integration with multiple channels is something which we have found very useful for our customers. So we have customers who are on the website. We use the website and also the ERPs. And you need not key in all of the data on both these systems. You could just have the centralized repository of Avalara, the rule engine and all of that. And then you could just leverage that to both these channels. So that's the intent. And then with respect to some of our customers, so they tend to do some of these manually, but then it might not be a scalable process because with the, as you might be knowing, with the ever-changing taxation rules, it might be difficult for you to maintain all of that. And so that way, it gives you complete peace of mind. So if you're choosing a solution like Avalara. So thanks a lot once again for your time today. And now I'll hand it over to Jordan. Over to you, Jordan.
Thank you, Praveen. So yeah, as both Kathy and Praveen mentioned, my name is Jordan Carpenter. I'm one of our alliance managers with Avalara, and we're going to jump into a little bit more information about current sales tax landscape, how that impacts folks within the manufacturing and distribution space, B2B merchants, as well as folks that are breaking into the direct-to-consumer market. So one of the big things I want to point out here is we talk to merchants daily, and they come to us and they say, hey, you know, we're in the manufacturing distribution space, or we sell B2B. We don't really need to worry about sales tax. Is that our problem? And it definitely is. It's something that folks should look at. And two big things, and we'll elaborate on both of these. But one is when you're selling to a tax-exempt customer or a reseller, right? It's kind of one and the same. They are required to provide you what is called an exemption or a reseller certificate that proves the reason why you did not have to charge them tax, and in turn they didn't have to pay tax. And then also a lot of the folks in this space, they had already started to move into the direct-to-consumer space, but obviously with everything going on with COVID, that has increased that exponentially, right? With the number of businesses shut down or their physical location shut down, they have had to look at other avenues for sales and are jumping into the e-commerce and in turn direct-to-consumer space. So, you know, we hit on tracking those exemptions, right? You're required to collect those certificates. You know, if an auditor comes in, which nobody wants, but they do come in, you want to make sure that you have those readily available and can provide them to said auditor. You know, the other thing that folks should look at within this manufacturing and distribution space is either where they're opening warehouses or where their goods may be stored. If they are using third-party warehouses for anything, that is creating, or it's a nexus creating activity. We'll expand on nexus as well, but at a high level, it's basically where a merchant or a business needs to be registered to collect sales tax, excuse me. Other big thing that we see in this space is sales reps traveling throughout the country. So typically, if you have a sales rep that either lives in a state or is traveling into a state, for those folks that cover larger regions, they also create nexus, which is that requirement to register and in turn collect, file, and remit sales tax. Another tax pain that comes up for folks in this space, and this one's a bit of a nightmare, is drop shipping, right? So this is something I've been with Avalara for going on, I guess, a little over 3 years now. And this is something that I learn about still daily, right? There's just so many complexities that come with this, right? You may own your product, but it's delivered by another wholesale company or another organization to that end customer. You're in 3 different states. You've got to look at taxability in those 3 states. You've got to look at the different rules associated with drop shipping. And again, just makes handling your sales tax exponentially more difficult. So as I promised, we'll jump into a little bit more about Nexus. So again, at a high level, Nexus is where you are required to register, and then once registered, collect or charge and collect sales tax, and then obviously once you collect that, you've got to remit that back to your state or local government. You'll hear us reference Nexus quite a bit through the rest of this presentation, as well as if you've ever spoken with someone at Avalara or plan to speak with them in the future, it's something that will come up quite a bit. So a couple of different types of Nexus, and I'll hit the two main ones and then run through those other three and let y'all read those as well. But number one would be physical presence or physical Nexus. So that's where you have a physical presence, right? You either have your company located there. You may have, as I mentioned before, goods located there. So that's big with folks that are utilizing Amazon or any third-party warehouses, right? Your goods are there. That is an extension of you and in turn a physical presence. And then also, as I had mentioned earlier, those sales reps or remote employees that may be spread throughout the country. And then another big one, and this has been, a topic of conversation more and more since a ruling that I'll elaborate on later came into place 2 years ago. It's something called economic nexus. So what that does is, when this ruling came out, it allowed states to set certain thresholds. And so their sales thresholds, sales revenue thresholds, I should say, or transaction thresholds, and they require remote sellers to register in that state, right? Because it creates nexus. Again, they've got to register in that state and start collecting sales tax. You've got a number of other types of nexus to look at as well. You've got click-through nexus, which y'all can see there. You've got affiliate nexus, which is a big one that folks in this space run into. As organizations are breaking into the B2C or direct-to-consumer market and selling via those marketplaces, that's another huge one to look at as well. They've got their own set of rules that you've got to track on that piece. I alluded to this in my little tidbit there about economic nexus, but the way that came about, so I'm sure most of you guys are familiar with Wayfair, furniture seller and reseller. So they were selling into the state of South Dakota, and they were not charging their consumer sales tax. So South Dakota looked at this two ways. They said, hey, this is an unfair advantage that you guys have on our local merchants, as well as we're not getting to recognize the revenue, right, that we should be collecting from you selling into our state. So they took this to the state Supreme Court at first, and then it was in turn pushed to the U.S. Supreme Court, and they ruled in favor of South Dakota. As you can see, they're back in late June, 2 years back, and they allowed states to set these economic nexus thresholds. So when that law first passed, or that ruling first passed, I should say, a number of states, as you can see here on the left, jumped on board. So they said, okay, we can do this. We're setting our thresholds. We're going to knock this out immediately. So again, all those states highlighted in blue. Let's fast forward that 2 years, and you can see that it has now grown to almost every state. So this map shows every state in the U.S. plus Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico does charge a U.S. sales tax rate. Out of all of the 51 counting Puerto Rico states, 5 do not collect sales tax. So if you look at that, we knock those out. The 46 left, I mean, the large majority of them already have thresholds set. I'm not positive what Missouri is doing right now on this. I know Florida has a discussion, or did, at least pre-COVID, had a discussion within their local government to determine what that threshold was going to be. So I would suspect that will be announced here fairly soon. In good old sales tax, or U.S. sales tax fashion, I should say, no state is different, right? The Supreme Court allowed them to set their own thresholds, and they made those decisions, right, within their own states. So You can see there Tennessee has a much higher threshold. New York and California are in a similar spot. So your sales, excuse me, revenue has to exceed $500,000. You can see Colorado went a little bit on the lower end, right? So they set it at 100,000. And then Hawaii, as well as my home state of North Carolina, they came in and they said, hey, we're going to have an or situation. So you either hit us on the revenue piece or you hit us on the transaction piece. So I always use socks as an example. That's just always my first thing that comes to mind. Let's say that you're selling socks and you sell 200 of them into North Carolina, or in this case, Hawaii. You are well, most likely, unless you're selling some expensive socks, you are well below those revenue thresholds, but you've hit on the transaction piece. So you are required to collect, or excuse me, to register and in turn collect. The other thing I want to point out, and I actually had a conversation with a merchant earlier today. So they were traditionally B2B, and they are breaking into the B2C or D2C, however you want to phrase that, market. And so they were like, well, we're only hitting thresholds for direct to consumer in a couple of states. Well, we had to look at all the states because a number of these states look not just at sales, at taxable revenue into the states, but they look at gross sales within to the states. So definitely something to take into consideration when you've been in that traditional B2B space and breaking into the direct to consumer space. So a number of folks that I speak with, as well as myself, I was definitely guilty of this pre-joining Avalara. I was like, oh, sales tax. So where I live in North Carolina, it's 7.25%. I'm like, that's pretty standard, easy to remember. That's all that matters. Anything I buy is 7.25%. Not the case. So most tax jurisdictions have unique taxability rules as well. So a couple of my favorites are on here. Bagels in New York. So let's say you're, up visiting in Brooklyn and you want to go to your corner deli and grab a bagel and take that to go. I'd recommend, if you want to save a little bit there, don't get it sliced, right? So they sell it to you unsliced. It is a food item, so it is not taxed. However, if you say, hey, slice that and throw some cream cheese on there, it is actually then classified as prepared food, much similar to the way you buy a dinner at a restaurant, and is taxed. Other thing, which isn't on here, but I think this is a super unique one. In the state of Texas, they look at software in a very unique way. And I need to do some more research because I'd love to know how they came to this rule around software specifically. But 80% of it is taxed and 20% of it's not. So that's all stuff that as a merchant, you should be paying attention to. Especially, excuse me, as you break into the D2C space. You know, make sure your taxability is in line there. So Avalara can help you manage all of this, and it's really a domino effect here in a good way. So, kind of where do most folks are asking us, where do I start? What do I do? So the best thing to do is, as I promised, I said we'd hit on Nexus a few times. You want to figure out where you have Nexus. So mainly, where you have that physical presence, where you sent sales reps into. Again, every state's a little different on that. Definitely the economic nexus piece, and then it always helps to look if you're selling via marketplace or click through an affiliate nexus. But you want to determine where you have nexus, right? Once you determine that, you know where to get registered. A lot of the folks we work with, they use their accounting firm to do that. It's something if merchants are working with a SALT attorney or a state and local tax attorney, they can knock out for them. If that's not a specialty, or excuse me, accountant, not attorney, if that's not a specialty of theirs and you want to look at Avalara to help with that, we do have a service that assists with that. And then once you're registered, kind of the rest of the stuff falls in place, right? So you've got to calculate and collect the right sales tax. Obviously, you've got to collect and track those exemptions. And then once you've collected the tax on the sales tax piece, you've got to remit that back to your state and local government. So we automate all of that for you. And then you might be saying, hey, Jordan, why automate, right? I can maybe handle this myself. So this is just showing you a little bit more about how, Nexus is triggered and how that has expanded since the Wayfair decision. I will tell you, I mean, I talk to merchants daily with our sales team here that I work closely with, and it's amazing how many folks have gone from, having to manage this in 2, maybe 3 states to upwards of 30, right? It's fairly straightforward if you're just, used to your home state, assuming it's not one of the more difficult ones like Colorado or Alabama. You can probably handle it, right? You're used to the sales tax returns, you're maybe used to the sales tax rates, but to be an expert on all of these rules around taxability, tax rates, the different filing schedules, takes an expert in that, and we've got a team here to help you all do that. That's kind of what I hit on there. That just gives you an idea of how complex, the tax rules are here in the U.S. And then, a topic of, or a big topic of this webinar has been folks within the manufacturing and distribution area. And that's something that Avalara does very well. It's something we're used to. We've got that solution that I mentioned that assists with managing exemption of reseller certificates. So a really good fit there. As you can imagine, retailers, right? Most folks now are selling across the U.S. So that's something that we have a number of retailers that are utilizing us. And then technology companies as well, right? There's a number of unique rules when it comes to technology in general, software in general, and again, most of those folks are selling across the U.S., if not the globe. And Praveen hit on this as well as he was transitioning this over to me, but another piece on why automate, right? You don't have to worry about it. We're accurate. We have a team that stays on top of those tax changes and taxability changes. You're able to streamline this and automate, again, any changes there, automate the filing. If an auditor comes in, you are at a lower risk, right? I would say this is something that's been audited. You're able to kind of hand over the keys to Avatax, our core platform, and allow them to look in there and much easier to pull data. Also, probably most importantly of all, you are able to focus on growing your business, right? So you can, if you've got an accounting team, you can kind of shift them around and allow them to focus on some other activities, again, to help that business grow. We work with a number of merchants where the owner is still very involved in this process, and that allows them to focus on some revenue generating activities. Praveen also mentioned this as well. Avalara plugs into and has pre-built integrations into a number of different platforms, both e-commerce carts and ERPs, or I should say e-commerce carts, ERPs, number of different systems as well. We've got some OMSs that we plug into in addition to these. I believe that number's increased a little bit as well. So I think we're around 730, 740, but most of the main platforms we're going to plug into. So 2 things I like to mention on this. If you ever have any questions, you can always reach out to me. I'll provide my contact information later in this slide. You can reach out to the folks at DCKAP and they can either let you know this if they know off the top of their head, or reach out to me if it's a system they're not as familiar with. Or you can always visit www.avalara.com/integrations. And there's a little search function in there where you can plug in whatever technology you're using and see if we have an integration. The one thing I will point out on that is if we don't have a pre-built integration, but that system is an open system of any kind, we do have the ability to connect them in with a little bit of dev work. So with that being said, I will I'll turn it over to Q&A and open the floor here.
All right. Well, thanks so much for giving us those presentations, Praveen and Jordan. I do
absolutely. Thank you, Kathy.
Have a couple questions here that I will go through with you guys that we have.
Okay.
All right, the first one is, what would you recommend if my company exceeds most of the state's economic nexus thresholds, but has not registered anywhere yet, just registered in their home state? Do they need to worry about historical liability?
So I'll jump in here, obviously, with it being a tax question. So I will state first that I'm not a CPA, and I would encourage speaking with a CPA on this as well. But it is definitely something you're going to want to look at. So one of the nice things is Avalara can help you moving forward and automate that process. As far as looking back, we do have a service that will work with organizations to generate what's called a VDA, or a voluntary disclosure agreement. So we can go on behalf of said merchant to a state and say, hey, we have somebody that wants to raise their hand and say we owe some back taxes. Typically, the states are pretty open to that. You know, they wouldn't know about it necessarily before you're raising your hand and again, voluntarily disclosing this information. So they're pretty receptive to that. It is something you want to look at, and again, we can help with that process as well.
All right, great. One other question then. This one is, how difficult is automation to implement and set up? We are a small business and my firm does not have a lot of staff time to dedicate to tech support. What would the advice be there?
Yeah, so it's really going to depend on the system that you're on, but with all of those pre-built integrations, it does make it fairly easy. You know, you've always got a technology team over here at DCKAP that you can utilize, if I can volunteer y'all there, if it's a client of yours. The other thing with when you sign up with Avalara, you do get assigned what we call a go live coordinator. So they'll work closely with you to get that launched. I've seen folks launch in, you know, on the smaller side and quicker side in less than 2 weeks. And sometimes it does take folks 30 to 60 days to get live. But if it's only a couple of systems and we've got the pre-built integrations, it's fairly straightforward.
Sure.
Great.
I can also add what Darren was just mentioning. So yeah, again, the setup on the ASO account, I think that takes time. But then once you have all of that set up, so again, setting that on the respective systems wouldn't take much of the time. So it is just seamless that way.
Perfect.
All right, great. Yeah, I think that was the questions that we had here. I don't see any others. So I think we've answered everybody's inquiries here. All right.
Well, thank you guys again. Thank you for including us in this.
Thank you, everybody.